The partial government shutdown is set to be handed off to a divided Congress in the new year as Republicans and Democrats trade blame for the impasse. So for more insight, let's bring in Republican strategist and Addo Worldwide co-founder Kevin Paul Scott and Democratic strategist and the founder and CEO of New Blue Interactive, Taryn Rosenkrantz. Taryn and Kevin, thanks for coming on and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thanks,
too. Happy New Year.
So, we're 8 days into this partial government shutdown, and yet it feels like we haven't made any progress, that we're no closer to a deal. So, Kevin, how do you see this playing out? One side is going to have to give. Who's it going to be?
You're exactly right. And now it's kind of coming down to the optics, because what you said is it feels like nothing has happened. That's because nothing has happened. And we're sitting here now where neither side wants to look like they're going to lose. And so if Trump gives it all on the wall, it looks like a failure for him. If the Democrats budge, it's a failure. So really, there's all of these things going on, and it really comes down to funding for the wall. And you have to wonder at this point if President Trump will eventually give in, because he already said he was going to take credit for this shutdown, or if he is trying to flex his muscles to show Speaker Pelosi that he's going to have some strength and he's not going to roll over when she takes control in January. It's really tough now because it really does come down to optics.
Yeah, and the president's incoming chief of staff said just yesterday that he's prepared, or he expects this to go on, the shutdown to go on for a very long time. So, Taryn, how do you see this playing out? Which side is going to give, in your opinion?
Well, I think President Trump is up against 70% of Americans in the latest poll said that they blamed President Trump and the Republicans for this shutdown. And nobody seems to be in favor of this shutdown and the financial impact that it's having on Americans nationwide, and also just on our financial stability across the country. So I think that this is, and across the world, to be honest. So I don't know how much longer he can go on. I mean, this is a tricky situation for the president. And if I was a Republican operative, I would be worried about the optics. I would agree with Kevin that there's so much at stake here. I mean, he campaigned that he was going to have Mexico pay for this wall. And now he's going sort of to bat, to die on this hill, if you will, for having the American government pay for it. And so that's going to be a really hard thing to overcome, especially when you got 70% of Americans saying, I blame you for this.
Kevin, you want to jump in here?
Well, I think Taryn is right that he's going to get some of the blame, but you have to remember, one of the reasons that President Trump was elected is because looks like he's not beholden to Washington, he's not doing the same old thing, and he's not driven by the polls. If there is one thing that has showed us this year, going into the 2018 midterm elections, the tariffs weren't popular, a lot of things weren't popular, and the president is sticking by his guns on this. The pullout of Syria is making a lot of Republicans angry. Look, you can disagree with the president's policies. You can't say that he's motivated by politics and poll numbers. And while I think this shutdown is not a great one, I think we have to remember that certain people find it refreshing that this president is willing to stand up and not do politics as usual.
Kevin, I want to play a soundbite from Congressman John Garamendi. He was on our show about an hour ago, and he brought up a very interesting point. He essentially said, hey, I might be more open to supporting the president's border wall, just a little bit, if perhaps he were able to provide a few more concrete details about where it would be, how much it would cost. Listen to this.
Well, I do have a hang-up here, and that is taxpayer money being spent without any plans whatsoever. The president says $5 billion, but has not offered one iota of information about where that wall would be built, what it would contain. Is it a spike fence? Is it a cyclone fence? What is it? Where is it?
Kevin, you think it would help if the president provided a few more details about his wall?
Yeah, I mean, I think it may help, but the reality is we're really far apart on this. He wants $5 billion. The Democrats aren't going to compromise on $3 billion or $4 billion or $2.5 billion. They don't want a wall. And so the issue is wall or no wall now. It's not really about how much money, how it's going to be built. It really comes down to, will the Democrats budget all on the wall? And if they do, even if it's for only $1 billion, it will be seen as a victory for the president. If they don't budge on the wall at all and President Trump gives in, it's going to be seen as a victory for the Democrats.
Taryn, President Trump said today that he's waiting for the Democrats. Democrats say that they're waiting for the president. What do you think Democrats should be doing right now? I mean, should they be walking over to the White House right now, as President Trump just suggested on Twitter?
Well, I think it's really unfortunate because this really squarely, that blame lies with the president of where we're waiting. When we had the Senate proposed a bipartisan compromise before the shutdown, and he just squarely rejected it. So unfortunately, it is in his hands. And it is, you know, I know he tweeted earlier in the week that it was sad that he was here for Christmas, but it's sad that we have Americans without getting paid right now because of a government shutdown over something when really the Senate put forth, I think, a bipartisan compromise of which there was really no reason to outright reject it, except for sort of this stubborn idea that, you know, to Kevin's point, that he can't lose, right? Like, he has to see this as a victory. And I do think one thing that Kevin said that wasn't right is that I do think the American people, the vast majority of them, really want to see us have our country be, you know, enhanced border security. They do want to see, you know, a country that is financially stable, that has a great leadership in this world in a great position. And
but the Democrats,
Taryn, I'm sorry, guys. I got to leave it there. But, you know, this is already the 9th longest government shutdown in U.S. history, so we'll see how much longer it drags on. Taryn, Kevin, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Happy New Year.